This week, I speak with Maxim Jago. He's a futurist and a filmmaker. We talk about his latest project, the Creativity Conference. This is a completely free virtual event featuring 90 presentations, 67 speakers, 7 panels, and 3 keynotes, and it's all 100% free. In this discussion, Maxim and I discuss who the conference is for and also the elusive world of creativity. What is it? How do you know if you have it? And if you have it, how do you use it? We talk about that and a ton more. All that is coming your way next. This is Twit. All right, Maxim, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to chat with you about the conference in particular, but also some of the things that you're also involved in that kind of led you to want to start a conference. Let's start there. Let's start with a little bit of background on, just sort of who Maxim Jago is and the kind of things that you do and what keeps you sort of interested and engaging in this crazy world of tech that we have going on.
Oh, my word. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, first of all.
Of course.
That's. I usually say that I've been pretending I know what I'm talking about since the mid-'80s, and sometimes in the US, because of the accent, people believe me. So I've been pretending to be understanding things and knowledgeable about things. When I was really young, I just became a fan of existence. I wanted to know how everything worked. I wanted to understand it, not because I particularly wanted to change it, but just because I appreciate it. And it turns out that word everything, when you're a kid, you think, well, I know that tea and coffee are different things, therefore I know the universe. But then as you get older, you realize, oh, wait, there's a universe of things out there. And so I've become a kind of lifelong lover of learning. And every opportunity I get to understand something and how it works, I take it. And along the way, I started to detect some patterns that emerge, and some trends in the way our thinking is, some trends in the way people are, some trends in important things to bring it back around to the conference, some trends in creativity. And I'll be arguing in our keynote at the opening of the conference that creativity is an intrinsic quality of the human experience, that you don't learn it, cannot be taught, because it's already there, like breathing. And as long as you are changing and causing change, you are creative. And so once you start with that, you realize, oh, wow, everybody's trying to express themselves. They're all trying to be causal agents. They all want to cast a shadow, have their place under the sun, leave footprints in the snow. We all want our existence to mean something. And one of the ways that your existence can be meaningful is by having impact. And so when I was thinking about the Creativity Conference, the goal originally was to create a kind of meeting of minds. And if you'll forgive me taking up the time with the story,
Please do.
There's a beautiful concept that was explained to me years ago, and I don't claim to have any connection with the tradition, but I was told that in the Native American tradition, the culture is largely shamanic. Shamanism is rooted in a Siberian fire religion, very ancient Siberian fire religion. But ultimately, I suppose you'd say that it's a religion that focuses on nature with a capital N. So there is a small n nature, which is trees and bushes and that kind of thing. And then there's capital N nature, which is closer to the concept of aptness, that there's a right way to do things that's appropriate under the circumstances. And of course, it's natural with a capital N for us as a species to spend time in nature with a small n. But I'm going off topic. So
Keep going. That was told I love this.
Is that when a Native American shaman is holding a very large ceremony, there may actually be 2 shamans that perform the ceremony. And the first is the one who performs the ceremony. They speak the words, they perform the ritualized aspects of the ceremony. The second shaman will be there to hold the space. They create an environment in which that good work can be done, whatever it is. And so when I had this idea for the creativity conference, originally it was intended to be held in Reykjavik in Iceland. And the concept is simple. We get cool people together who are passionate about really being alive, really participating in this thing called life, and give them an opportunity to share ideas and connect. And so I described it as a meeting of minds. And my goal was never to be a speaker. I was never going to be, if you'll forgive the parallel, the shaman holding the actual ceremony. I wanted to be the one holding the space. So my goal was to create an environment where everyone felt safe and included and welcome. And it was meant to be a kind of campfire chat where people would say, one person says to the other person, "Oh, you do that amazing thing, don't you? Tell me about that amazing thing."
Mm-hmm.
And the second person would say, "Ah, well, thank you for asking. Actually, here's the essence of it. Here's the heart of the matter. Let me tell you how it really works." And in that safe environment, people would learn and grow and connect, I hope, and develop projects together and be more impactful in the world and healthier and happier and more whole. And I think ultimately, creativity is about self-realization. Our goal is to take whatever is the essence of you in the world, whatever is truly you, not the nurture, the nature. If you believe that people have a soul, your soul. If you believe that it's the id and the ego and the superego, it's that inner part of you, the observer, that has no opinions and is simply experiencing. In existentialism, they would call it the passenger. But whatever that being is, I think creativity is an opportunity for that being to manifest itself in the world. And ultimately, and I think you and I spoke about this briefly before, ultimately, you can't really know if you're doing it right, and creativity is messy. And it doesn't matter if your creativity is a great spreadsheet or a business plan or statue or carving in a wall, whatever it is that you're creating, you can't know if it's going to be right. You can't really know who you are, where you are, what's going on, what's happening to you, what other people really mean when they speak. You just know that sound seems to have come out of their faces. There's a lot of uncertainty, but you always know, and only you always know, if you meant it. If you really mean being alive, if you really intend the things that you set out to do, and you're not pretending, you're not wearing a mask, you're not being cynical or postmodern or half attempting it because then you can say, "Oh, I failed because I wasn't trying properly." No, you're really going for it. And for me, that is being alive. And creativity in all its forms is a way for us to, it's a path for us to walk. But it's interesting that it doesn't have to be the traditional arts, the classic arts. It could be parenting. It could be intentionally walking along the street. My favorite art form is probably Dadaism, where they took surrealism as a concept and turned it into life practice. One person apparently, his Dadaist artistic practice was to eat spiders and shout at priests. And that was his thing. And there's a beautiful video, a film, I should say, of people running in slow motion, Dadaists running in slow motion. And they're doing this really, really slow run. And there's all these people standing by looking at them who are at full speed, wondering what on earth they're doing. And they put wires in their scarves out behind them. And that was an intentional, creative act to draw attention to the act. Almost, if you think about the Japanese tea ceremony as well, the intentional act. And ultimately, it comes down to intention. And I suppose love. There's this feeling of connection and growth and life force. And those two things together allow you to create things. Sorry, I jumped from me to the conference, but that's kind of where we're.
I love this. This is great. You and I spoke yesterday, and I have a list of questions. By the way, when we spoke yesterday, my mind was completely blown just from that short conversation we had about creativity. Blown from the perspective of resetting just sort of my mindset around creativity, and I'll tell you what that was. So I want to go back into the conference in a second, but just to bring that full circle. You said something like you just said about the just sort of committing to something. And to date, the way that I've been operating has been to give myself permission to fail. Therefore, I'm more, it's more likely that I'll try a thing if I know that it can be considered experimental. Hey, I can start a podcast. Let's just try it. And if it succeeds, great. If it doesn't, no big deal. It was an experiment. And that kind of follows in the whole line of Silicon Valley, fail, 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 succeed, that kind of metaphor. You switched my mind a little bit because you're thinking of, just commit, lean into it, put your shoulder into this thing that you feel like that you want to do, and do more of that and keep doing it until you feel like you succeed. And then if it doesn't, shift gears. Is that fair? Is that kind of what you were talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we were touching on yesterday is that there's so much to say about what you just raised.
Yeah.
One thing is that we live in a culture, I'm from the UK, you're in the US. We both live in cultures where we're assessed as soon as we're old enough to understand the concept of being judged, we're judged. You're getting grades at school, your clothes are acceptable or unacceptable. There's this whole list of things that our focus is on the external. And if somebody approves or disapproves, we're raised before we're old enough to have opinions about this issue of judgment, before we even understand whether judgment is something that we approve of. We're taught that if somebody has an opinion of you that is approval or disapproval, it's important. That their approval or disapproval is something that you are somehow bound by, and that somehow it's more important than your own approval or disapproval. That's a very interesting gender difference as well, the responses to that. And it's difficult to tell if it's nature or nurture. But for boys growing up, there is a bit more of this gung-ho attitude of, well, if I break it, I break it.
Mm-hmm.
But for girls growing up, there's this attitude, and nobody's quite clear about where this comes from, that it's totally unacceptable for you to fail in any way. And so before you begin any endeavor, you have to be certain that you will succeed perfectly, or somehow it's a problem, that somehow you're going to be judged and it's unacceptable. And I've mentored a lot of newcomers into a couple of different industries, and the male and female, you get these young people, their attitudes, the women, the young women are, it's like they're waiting for somebody outside of themselves to give permission for them to do a thing that they have every right to do. And they're not even sure why they're waiting. They can't tell you. Like it's like this deep in our culture, nurture aspect of our culture. We're coached into it. But what I wanted to touch on is how do you assess what to do? And I think that it's important to recognize that as the information changes, you may have to make different decisions. The information that you're making decisions on the basis of changes constantly. And that it could be a new thought that you've had. It could be a book that you've read. It could be a comment that somebody makes. But whatever the origin, it could be just that you spent time thinking about it and you had that deeper understanding. Whatever the origin, you must be free to no longer agree with yourself. So whatever you thought 5 minutes ago or 5 days ago or 5 years ago, you don't have to defend it. You can say, I did think that at the time and I don't think it now. And it's interesting that I thought it at that time. And you can't avoid the consequences of your actions. That's the origin of the concept of karma was never somebody judging you. So the Akashic record wasn't about weighing up the pros and cons of your life. The whole point is it's a pendulum swing. Whatever you send out away from you comes back to you. And I think that that's a simple approach to viewing consequence. Whatever you do, you will have the benefit of the consequences of your actions. Yeah. But you have to be free to say, oh, I got a new idea. I'm going to do a different thing. So you really commit, really do the thing. Failing is the thing. So don't feel like getting it wrong at the first place is a problem, because it's not just inevitable, it's necessary. You're not going to learn to ride a bike by just getting on it and having perfect balance, because there's a knack. And the only way you can get that knack is by leaning the wrong way, one way, and then you lean the wrong way the other way. And you keep doing that, and gradually some part of you inside this proprioception thing goes, there's another drive here. I can feel it. And you can only feel it by going wrong, and then you get it right. And I think that applies to every form of creativity. But I wanted to mention as well, because this was a recent realization for me, and I'm working on a practical philosophy book at the moment, and it came up a lot in my thoughts. We have this big problem that a lot of artists face, and also a lot of people that are, I'm thinking of pluripotent cells, like stem cells, they can do anything. You get these people that could do so much, and then they think, well, how can I choose what to do? And then you try to do lots of different things, and you can't succeed at any of them because you can't commit to any of them. And how do you move forward? And I think I've worked it out, and I'm going to explain this as best as I can. I'm still finding the language to explain this, but ultimately, you and I and every person, as far as we know in the world, is a totally subjective person. Everything that you experience is actually constructed in your mind. Let's say, we don't know exactly, but let's say it's constructed in your imagination. All this information comes into your brain, light and sound and feelings and tastes and smells. Well, there's all these something like 28 different types of sense that we have. And all of that's not actually going directly to your conscious mind. It's going into your mind, your total mind. And then there's this kind of constructed version of that. All this precognitive processing goes on, and a limited subset of that information is presented to your conscious mind, and that is conscious experience. And there's a slight time delay, including when you make a decision. You don't actually make decisions consciously. There have been loads of studies on this. A decision is made non-consciously, and then a moment later, your conscious mind experiences making the decision as if it were making the decision now. So the conscious mind is deluded into thinking it's the decision maker, and we think that this very limited subset of information that we've got is us, and it's not. It's the shadows on the wall of Plato's Cave of Shadows, if you're familiar with the myth. So here we are trying to make decisions about life, and the answer, I think, is to stop looking outside of yourself for those answers. You cannot find them there because you can never actually know what anybody else really thinks. You can't really know what's important in the world. What you can know is, in your heart of hearts, something moves you. It makes you feel alive. It brings you alive. It fills you with a life force. Do that. And when I was a teenager, I read that the secret of life is to find out what you love and do that. And sometimes you're going to have to go through a lot of things you don't love to find out what you do. So
and when do you get off that, Maxim? When do you get off of that train, though? Right. So that what you're saying reminds me of two sayings, right? So one is the incorrect definition of insanity, right? So which is repeating the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And then the flip side of that coin is, if at first you don't succeed, try again, right? Yeah. So those are at odds with each other. How, and putting it in a creative sense or even a photography sense, if I'm a new-ish photographer in search of what my genre is going to be, right? I don't know if I'm going to be a portrait photographer or a landscape or macro, whatever. How do I know when to get off the train? How do I know that, I'm definitely not a portrait photographer. I need to try something else.
Yeah. So, I think what you highlighted in those two phrases there is interesting, that most of philosophy is linguistics. There's a lot of language traps. Mm-hmm. But I just mentioned that I think what I've found is that if I have an experience, and by I mean the subjective inner me, never mind what I show other people, never mind how I describe myself or how others perceive me. But if I have an experience that I can go without sleep for days. This is amazing. That's life force as a kind of nutrition that you get. But there's a flip side of that. There are experiences, and I would guess that everyone can empathize. There are experiences where the experience itself leaves you feeling dead inside. You feel kind of hollow. It's like it's life negating. And that life negating feeling is the sign, you know what, this is not for you. Interestingly, this is kind of the origin of vampirism. We think of vampires as drinking blood, and that was a very late development in the concept of vampires. Originally, it was energy vampires. And we've all had that experience of being with somebody where just during the conversation, you feel like, I just can't keep my eyes open. I have to sleep. And they are the old, this is, probably psychology rather than any kind of actual energy transfer. But whatever the experience is that you're having speaking to this person, that experience is negating the energy for you. So again, to go back to your example, if you're getting into photography and your friends are all saying, "Oh, you're really great at portrait photography," this is a really great example of what you should do. Look at this amazing work. And you're thinking, but it's boring. I just don't want to do it. I really want to photograph the clouds. Photograph the clouds. I had a conversation. There was a young lady that worked on a film production I was directing. We all had dinner, and I said, "So tell me about you. You're a photographer and everything, but you tell me about your life." And she said, "Oh, actually, I work for this insurance company, and I'm getting trained up and I'm getting my certification and I'm going to be able to my certificates so that I can go up the ladder in this insurance company, and I'm hoping to have that opportunity, and that's what I want. And I said, forgive me putting it, I didn't put it as politely as I'm about to. You'll have to fill in the blanks for the language. But I said, I'm afraid that sounds like nonsense. What you've just described sounds awful, and you looked miserable telling me. I've found this very helpful as a mentor. If you say to people, I have this button. I can't show it to you because it's magic, but I've got this button in my palm of my hand. And if I press this button, you can be absolutely anything at all. Astronaut, fire engine driver, vet, you name it. So just anything. And you're already experienced and you're already capable and you're respected and you're producing amazing work in that thing. So now, but for me to press the button and for it to work, you have to tell me what the thing is that you want to magically be able to do. So I'm ready. My finger's on the button. What is the thing? And she said something like singer in an all-girl band, singer in a girl band. And I said, well, why would you not do that? Why are you working for an insurance company? I said, well, do you have any kind of background in singing? She said, yeah, years ago, my friends and I, every week we would get another number, we would record a cover, we'd film it, and we'd rehearse it, and we'd produce this work. Every single week we would do it, but then we all went to different colleges, and the thing kind of passed away. And I was saying, but this old psychologist friend of mine used to say it's healthier to ask yourself why not than it is to ask yourself why should I? And I found it very helpful to ask myself, why would I not do this thing? And that question could be have another coffee or eat a cookie or go for a walk. But if you ask yourself, why would I not do this? You find very often you don't have good reasons. And if you can't think of a good reason not to do it, you tend to regret the things you don't do, not the things you do. So do it, go for it. And if you work on a thing and you really commit and you find that it's not working out for you, it's new information. Okay, that didn't work. The thing is, though, that when you have an experience that you don't enjoy, it's a form of emotional pain. And we live in a culture where we're taught that any form of suffering or pain is unacceptable in any form. And I would argue, it's a much longer discussion than we have time for, but I would argue that experiencing those challenges, that pain and that suffering, could be why we're here. It's certainly a big part of our experience of being alive. But the pain, if you have a cut on your arm, the pain that you feel isn't the cut on your arm. The pain is the messenger trying to communicate with you. Hey, look at your arm. You need to pay attention to this. Your arm is bleeding. Do something about it. Clean the wound, dress the wound. And so what we do wrong, in my opinion, is we avoid the pain as if somehow by doing so we avoid the problem. And actually, the pain is doing its job and trying to help you. It's trying to communicate with you and inform you that there's something wrong. And if you really turn into the pain and really non-judgmentally just see it, feel it, know it for what it is, and really understand it, usually it very clearly expresses to you what the issue is and what you need to do. And it's not the pain itself. So when it comes to things like, this kind of dystopian feeling of, I've got the great camera, I've got the equipment, I've got everything, but I've got nothing to photograph. Well, that's painful, existential uncertainty. Well, wait a second. Really, what is that? I have a friend who says that she's bored very often. And as I keep reminding her, it's because she's unwilling to take responsibility for being alive, for the consequences of her actions. So she'll never commit to anything. Yeah. And so, of course, she's bored. She's not doing anything. And so I think that the trick is to accept your reality without judgment, really see it. And, when it comes to creative work, try a bunch of stuff and see what makes you come alive. And if it stops making you feel alive, do something else. And to go back to the comment that you made earlier about, doing the same thing again is madness. And if you expect the same outcome, and then try again, if you fail the first time, actually, those are two different sentiments. Because when you try again, you always try a little bit differently. So you are trying it differently. And also the problem with the expectation that things will be different when you do something the same again, you expect a different outcome. The problem with that is that you're not being realistic. If you do exactly the same thing twice, you probably should get a similar outcome. And so if your expectation is that the outcome will change, then you need to think about your relationship with reality. You need to think about your relationship with causality. You know, if I drop an egg and it smashes, the next one's probably going to smash too. And if I just hope it won't smash, then I'm in denial about some of the beauty of the, you know, if you look at the color palette of a painter, you've got to have the dark colors and the light colors. You can't see the light without the darkness. You can't hear the music without the silence. You've got to have these aspects of our life that are challenging. There's nothing wrong with them. They simply are. So, I think the answer is realism.
I love that. I love that. See, this will be one of my episodes that I listen to again as a listener. Just to So, you know, I wanted to throw this out at you, and before we dive in, I have a couple more questions before we wrap. Just on the world of creativity and, you know, some of the ideas behind it. But take me through this conference and the genesis of the conference and which is the Creativity Conference for folks which you know by the title of this episode. But what can people expect from the conference? What changes can they expect to have leaving the conference that they didn't have going into the conference? You know, and I'm assuming one of those changes isn't going to be a lighter wallet, right? So tell me about the whole flow.
Thank you for asking about that. It's called the Creativity Conference. And the clue's in the name. It's completely free. In fact, all we need for you to sign up is your name and your email address, and that's it. And that's just so that we can provide you with a login for the website. We're not doing any creepy tracking or anything like that. We're very grateful to our sponsors, Dell, NVIDIA, and Intel, who gave us enough funds to provide the conference for free. And it's worth noting, actually, that all of our speakers, including our keynotes, are all speaking for free. Everyone is contributing their time and energy to this conference for the love of the subject matter, and I'm really honored and privileged. And I'm just blown away by the people that have committed. They're going to be sharing their insights, their wisdom, their experience. And we had a couple of rules when we were inviting proposals from speakers for the conference. One is that this conference is not, and these are really important, valuable things, but they're not. It's not about branding, workflows, business skills, taxes. It's not about, I've recorded about 2,300 tutorials on post-production for film and TV. And, I speak at conferences about workflows and technology and futurism, of course. But we don't want any of that for this conference. We don't want any of that for this conference because it's not what the conference is for. It's not about skills development. The conference is about inspiration, and that form of inspiration that so moves you that you have no choice but to create something. And then having made that decision, it's about how you manifest that creative work. So we have a very broad range of speakers. We have a choreographer who's going to talk about developing self-expression through movement. We have an acting coach, the CEO of a bank. We have authors, performance poets, we've got filmmakers, photographers, of course. And, we've got, actually, I think of the 90 sessions that we're running, plus 3 keynotes, 7 of those 90 sessions are panels. So the 83 remaining sessions, over 40 are just on the subject of inspiration. So it's how to be inspired creatively and what form that takes in multiple different industries. It's just phenomenal, the talks that people have lined up. It's just fantastic. So the idea is that you log in. We're recording all of the sessions, but it's even if you can't make the dates, it's this Friday coming, Friday the 22nd to Sunday the 24th. 6 one-hour sessions. There's a keynote in the middle of each day, 5 concurrent rooms. You're not going to be able to attend all of it. If you register, you will have access to all of the recordings after the event. And if you don't, we will be releasing the talks publicly gradually on our YouTube channel. But there are some speakers that asked us not to share the contents of their talk publicly. So you can access it as an attendee. Like it's like 7 seconds, email address, name, and you've signed up. And all you have to do is turn up. We're running it through Zoom. You don't have to have a Zoom account. You can just have the software running. There's a web version as well. And we're going to kick off. The times are New York time, EST. So it's 10 a.m. New York time. The first session begins. And about 1 p.m. New York time on Friday, we have the first keynote. And I'm not speaking at the conference, but because it's my conference, I'm claiming the opening keynote. We then have Vashi Nedomansky, is a famous Hollywood film editor. He's presenting our day 2 keynote. We'll be announcing the winners for a short film competition that we've been running. I'm sorry that the deadline's passed now, but check out the winners. And day 3, we have the phenomenal speaker, Dan Clark, who's going to really sum up the conference and put a bow on it, I think is the way he put it. Dan's one of the top 10 speakers in America. He's got multiple gold discs as a songwriter. He's the primary contributor to the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. It's an absolute honor to work with him. He's presenting our day 3 keynote. And the genesis for the conference was this idea of a meeting of minds. So we were fully lined up to run the conference in person in Reykjavik in Iceland, held at Reykjavik University. We had the best dome cinema in Europe. Booked for our movie night, our film night. We had a fantastic venue in the middle of Reykjavik for our music night and for our closing night party. We were ready to sell tickets just as the pandemic really started to hit. So we've postponed the in-person conference and we're moving the whole thing online.
What a good way to sort of get a taste for what the in-person conference will be, hopefully in 2022 or 23 when that rolls out. So that's fantastic. So good. So if people want to register for this, I'll have the links in the description for the YouTube video and on the blog post, etc. But give us the URL if people are driving, they want to jot it down.
So it's really easy to remember. The official website is creativityconference.is. .is is the Icelandic domain extension. And there's all the information about the conference. There's a big register button there, and you can access the schedule and join us.
Love it. Love it. Okay. Just a couple more questions to wrap up.
Okay.
These are tough questions. So, suit up.
42 is always the answer if you're
all right. Yeah, exactly. Hitchhiker's Guide. All right. So, creativity. Obviously, this conference is all about creativity and getting people sort of jazzed about things that they want to be creative about. Going deeper into the idea of creativity, and you're the perfect person. I can't think of a better person to ask this question to. Is creativity science? Do you think the thing that is creativity that makes me want to do certain things and, be symmetrical or colorful or whatever, is that science, do you think? And there's a follow-up question, so your answer will dictate the follow-up question.
Well, thank you. This is a phenomenal question. I have a kind of a simple answer and a more complex answer. I think that the act of creating is so fundamental and intrinsic to our being that every time you make a decision of any kind, you are creating. That decision could be, shall I take another step or not? That decision could be, how shall I think about this thing? Whatever you do intentionally is creation. Having said that, I think that there's a separate conversation to be had that is really centered not on the word creativity or to create, but rather it's centered on the word quality. There's a fantastic book written in the 70s by Robert Pirsig called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. It's a multi-million bestseller at the time. People haven't heard about it much these days. And in that book, the author begins, it's a narrative about people riding motorcycles across America. But there's this conversation between the characters about what the word quality really means. And the first part of the book is about, well, how do you know, for example, a quality cup or a quality table or chair? What is it that means you can look at an object and identify it as having high quality? And it pretty much comes down to fitness for purpose and elegance in the design. So then the author says, well, okay, if that's what we mean when we talk about this ineffable concept of quality, there's an object, you pick it up, you immediately know that it's quality. What would it mean if we applied that word to a human being? What would it mean for a person to be a quality human being. Now, when we talk about personhood status or selfhood or an identity, we rarely actually mean the physical body. What we mean is the persona, the personality, the identity of the person. Does this person have an integrity? Does this person have a sense of humor? And so on. And so it's a very interesting question to ask yourself, am I fit for purpose? And is there elegance in my design? Do I approach being human in ways that are elegant? Am I compassionate? Am I kind? Am I bigger than the problem? Do I consider other people's needs? Am I selfless when it's appropriate and selfish when it's appropriate? Do I have wisdom? And wisdom comes from experience, not age, unfortunately. So when it comes to creativity, there are many aspects of the creative process, regardless of the medium, where yes, you can say that there is technique, there is technology. If you intend to draw a straight line, can you really draw a straight line? If you want to draw, there's a lovely story about somebody created a black, I think it's a black that was blacker than any other black. It absorbs almost all light. So when you look at it, it just looks like a silhouette. And there was a restriction on who could use it. And so people started making other colors. So they made the pinkest pink that could possibly exist. But the rule was anyone could buy it except the person that made the blackest black. Only that one person is not permitted to buy the pinkest pink. It's fantastic. So as one of the challenges that we have when we're working particularly with technology is that you've got all these issues. It's the team developing it. And, they say a camel is a horse designed by committee, and you get feature creep and you get problems with the technology that incur upon your creative process. We need the tools that we use to be elegant, to get out of the way and allow us to create. And if you look at some of the companies making the most elegant technologies to enable people to create, they do just that. They get out of the way and they let you focus on the creativity. But there are also skills that you need. And those skills can be, if you look at the golden mean, that's knowledge, right? If you know about the golden mean, you can assess a composition. I have a concept for composition that I call the weighting system that I'm planning on writing a book about. These are intellectual approaches. But having said all of that, some people just seem to have an affinity for one or other form of creativity. There was a famous dancer who said, the interviewer said to her in an interview, "Why did you become a dancer?" And she said, "Well, obviously, if I could speak it, I wouldn't need to dance it." And there's some people, you watch them move and you just think, I will never move that way. I would love to, but I know that there's something about that person. There's people who can sing, I can make noises come out of my face, but then there'll be somebody who, I had a girlfriend years ago who, Indian, from actual India, from the Punjab region, and she sang to me the first time. She was a classical Hindi singer. And the first time she sang, I cried. I had never heard a human voice make sounds like that before.
Wow.
And knew I would never be able to.
Yeah.
So I think that as an artist, there are people who, through an intellectual pursuit, can achieve great art that is powerful and impactful and changes people. It's transcendent. I think with true art, there's this debate about capital A art and small a, let's call it art craft. And I would say capital A art changes the receiver of the art. When you experience the art, you are changed by the experience. But, if you have an affinity, there's that same old psychologist that used to say the thing about, why it's better to ask yourself, why not? He used to say, if you're a clock, find out how to tell the time. If you have qualities that lead you to a particular affinity, a predisposition, a strength, why would you deny that? Play to that strength and dive into it, revel in it. Unless it makes you feel dead inside. But I find that very unlikely. I think it's very likely that if you listen, just as I said, pain is a messenger, so is joy.
I love that pain is a messenger thing. The analogy that popped into my head was for example, in your car, if you get a low air warning on the dashboard of your car, you have a choice. You could take care of the problem, fix or, add air to the tire, or you could cut the wires that lead to the light that's annoying you, telling you there's
Exactly.
and it's
I love
fixed
that.
after that, right?
That's great. Yeah, I'm stealing that. That's a great analogy. Yeah. I had that
It's
years
totally
ago. I
true.
had a car that was overheating and overheating and overheating. And ironically, people name their cars. This was my first car. So I
Yeah.
named it Ra after the Egyptian sun god. And then
Nice.
ironically, because I thought I was, because then when I pull away from the lights, I can say Ra. And then ironically, it had overheating problems. And you reminded me because it took it to all these different garages, and there's a little heat actuated valve in engines, the
Yeah. Yeah.
thermostatic valve. It's like in US money, it's $5, and I kept going to these mechanics, and they say no, it's definitely not that. I had a new radiator. I had one of the pipes, they're super tough pipes, ballooned up. And eventually, a friend of mine who did his own repairs, it was £2.50 in English money. It was $5. We went and got one, a couple of turns of a spanner, changed the thermostatic, and I had 2 replacement sensor units because they were saying no, the engine's fine, it's just the sensor, and they changed the sensor twice, saying no, it's. And I was saying every time I was saying, are you sure it's not the thermostat? I read that could be a thing. Could be
Yeah.
stuff.
Of course
But
not.
yeah,
That's too inexpensive.
yeah, but that's a lovely analogy. Yeah, you do have the choice. But to take your point slightly further as well, and to go back to the point I made earlier, you are absolutely free to ignore the consequences of your actions. You are not free to avoid the consequences of your actions. You will experience the consequences of your actions, and if you choose to be in denial about them, and go about your business as if you didn't cause those things to happen, that pendulum swing will happily hit you in the face. The pendulum doesn't care.
That's
It's
deep.
going to come back, and
You're
it's up to
free to
you to
experience.
embrace that. Yeah,
You're free to experience the consequences of your actions or
yeah,
your inaction, right?
right.
So-
Well, but then again, I would say that thinking is an action, and choosing to be inactive is an action. If you're out of shape and you're unhappy about being out of shape, the solution is uncomplicated. Eat the right amount of food of the right kind and exercise your body. And no matter which approach you take, whatever kind of diet you might choose, and what foodstuffs you might select, if you want to get thinner, you need to have less energy in than you have going out. If you want to
Mhm.
gain weight, you've got to have more energy in than you have going out. Separately to that, and it's not complicated, it really is as simple as that. It's just that. And if you want to be physically fit, muscular, healthy, strong, flexible, it's really simple. Stretch more often and exercise. It's very uncomplicated. And if you choose not to do these things, that's a choice. And I'm not getting into judging why, right? I'm not talking about whether it's appropriate or inappropriate, whether you should or shouldn't is none of my business. I'm just talking about consequence. If you don't exercise, you will get out of shape. And feeling badly about it is fine. But if you own it and you acknowledge that the reason you're out of shape is that you chose not to exercise, now you're empowered. Now you have agency. Now you are in command of your ship. You're at the helm. You are choosing things and living. But if instead you say, oh, I'm out of shape because my life is awful,
Mhm.
or I'm out of shape and I dare not think about why, now you're just on the receiving end of life. You're passively reacting to these experiences. And the truth is that you usually, there's a Indian guru who posts lovely messages on Instagram, and he says, we all have trauma, we've all had bad things that happen to us, and the fact is that there's going to be one of 2 outcomes. You are either going to become wounded or wise, and you get to choose. If you're willing to accept that there's good things and bad things happen, and there's positive experiences and negative. And again, this relates directly to creative work. You're going to make some really bad creative work. I have a video in a box called, it's called Tiddles a World. And it's a film I made at film school that is so awful that if I ever win an Oscar, I will put this video online for the world to see, that we can all make appalling creative work. It is so bad, so unfunny, so ridiculous. It's the day in the life of the cat that lived at the college I was at film school for. And it's just terrible. But if you accept that the outcomes are because of the choices that you made, now, when you're trying again, you're doing so intelligently. The empirical system, the empirical scientific model, is one where you have very precise awareness of the parameters and you change just one parameter and you see what happens.
Yep.
If you know exactly what you did wrong, you're one step closer to doing it right.
Love that. I love that. All right, this is the question that we're going to end on, Maxim. And this is another deep one, so get ready. You're going to have to dig deep for this one. It involves creativity, of course, as it applies to atrophy or, let's say, entropy, right? So your creative energy, if you will, a thing that drives you to want to do stuff. In your case, building amazing conferences, filmmaking, etc., teaching, that kind of thing. Is that a finite or infinite resource over time?
Oh.
In other words, when you turn 75, are you going to have the same, biology notwithstanding, are you going to have the same creative spark that you do now, or does it die over time? Or is it like a muscle that needs, like you mentioned, exercise? Does it need to be exercised in order to keep it strong? What do you think?
This is a fantastic question. Wow, thank you. Okay, there's a couple of things to say. The first is that there are some biological processes that impact cognitive function. If you're dehydrated, if you're stressed or anxious, if you're sleep deprived, these things have a biological impact on our capacity, our functionality, our brains don't work as well. Also, by the way, and this is going to seem totally out there, but a really important thing, take extra omega-3. We need a lot of omega-3 as a species, particularly our mammalian brain, which is where our decisions actually take place. The cerebral cortex rationalizes the decisions that we make emotionally with them in the mammalian brain. And our mammalian brains have heavy demands for omega-3. If you eat a lot of oily fish, you're all good. If you don't, you can get great supplements. Take them. It is transformative for your capacity for mental focus and function, and also for emotional well-being. It's a biological factor. As we age, there are some changes that occur that impact the biological processes of the brain. And so that can impact things like attention span and energy. Just physically, you're tired. There are some technologies being developed to help us reverse some aspects of biological aging, but that's a conversation for another day. Putting those aside, yes, absolutely, it's a muscle. There's an exercise that you can practice that I think children should be taught at school. That's quite life-changing. And it's a mental discipline exercise. And the trick is, your goal is to count to 10 without thinking of anything else. And most people make it to 2. Because as soon as you think, for example, I'm thinking of these numbers, you have to start at the beginning again. You have to just think of the numbers themselves. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If at any moment you catch yourself thinking, I'm in a room, or I exist, or I'm sitting, or that's a tree, or anything other than the numbers, you go back to the beginning. If you're doing well, of course, everyone listening to this is trying this now, so they're not listening to it.
I'm trying it right now too.
Right? If most people, if you really have a go for it, you'll get to 3. And if you're honest with yourself, you've got to be brutally honest with yourself. Even things like, I can feel myself breathing, go back to 1 again. A lot of people actually just get to 1 and then they're thinking of another thing. You've got to think of no sensations, no thoughts, nothing that you're reminded of, nothing to do with yourself, nothing that happened in the past, nothing that you imagine will happen in the future. You've got to be completely present now, which, as Eckhart Tolle says, is the only moment in which you're truly having experiences, and the only moment in which you are truly an actor in the old sense of the word. It's the only moment in which you are actually alive. Everything else is half remembered or imagined in the future. So this exercise, it took me a long time. In fact, I made it once only to 10. and then thought, right, I'm never doing that again. But the consequence, it took months, which, by the way, took a couple of months for me. But what it does is it teaches you this mental discipline. You've probably heard the marshmallow experiment. Sometimes they call it the cookie experiment. Give young children, you put them in a room and you say, there's a cookie, and I'm going to go away for 10 minutes. If you want, you can eat the cookie now, but if you wait till I come back, you can have 2 cookies. It's a simple experiment. And then they track the lives of the children, and the children that have the self-discipline, the self-control and restraint to not eat the cookie right away and to wait, because they see the greater value that they can restrain themselves in that situation, tend to live much more successful and happier lives. And it turns out that there's a genetic predisposition. And in fact, people in prisons, there's a marker in your genes that indicates that you're less likely to be cognizant of potential future outcomes. And that makes you more likely to commit petty crimes. Most people in prison are in prison for small crimes, not big bank heists.
Yeah. And
so, my very limited understanding of Freud and his teachings about what sanity was is that sanity is looking normal amongst the normal people. And what that means is you've got to be able to recognize your environment accurately, see what's going on around you, and then moderate your behavior appropriately, which means you have to have self-control and empathy and awareness. You've got to be able to adapt intentionally in a way that allows you to behave acceptably in a socialized way amongst people. And basically you're sane. You could be imagining that you're a dragon in disguise floating on air, but as long as you're able to recognize that your outward behavior should appropriately be a certain thing, you're probably sane. The rest is just in your imagination. So in terms of decline as you get older, yes, these are muscles that you can maintain, and you need to. You've got to work them. Your brain is very much like a muscle. It turns out that this idea that you don't make new brain cells is a myth. But for you to create new brain cells, you have to do new things, learn a new language, learn to play an instrument, have new experiences. So having new experiences is crucial to the biology of our mental well-being. They say that things like Alzheimer's and dementia can be impacted by forcing yourself to learn new languages and try new experiences. It exercises the brain, gets the blood flow going, helps to clean the brain. Although there's a very interesting scientist in Australia have found a harmonic frequency for the platelets that build up when you have Alzheimer's that causes them to fragment and wash away, reversing the symptoms of Alzheimer's. It's very interesting.
Wow.
Okay. It's just sound therapy. They just found the frequencies. Very, very interesting. And I think we'll see more therapies like that in the future. Now, I interviewed a lady called Barbara Hubbard some time ago as part of a documentary I was working on, led by the psychiatrist, the New York psychiatrist, Anna Yusim, who coincidentally is speaking at the conference about this. She speaks about the merging of science and spirituality from a psychiatric point of view. It's fascinating. And Barbara Hubbard was 84 when we interviewed her, and she said, I am only now coming into my power. She said, a lot of people think that it's a mental decline, and actually it's not. It's an upward slope, and it just keeps going. And I feel like every day I'm greater than I was the day before. However, if you believe that you will decline as you get older, that's exactly what would happen. Because you are what you think, you're not what you think you are. Whatever you think about becomes your reality. And so they found with placebo medicine, for example, if you believe that the medicine works, it often literally will have an impact on your body as if it were a chemical impacting you. But there's no chemical in it. It's chalk tablets that you're taking. Yeah. Or they did a study on college students. It's fascinating. The study is that you take a multiple choice test. And of course, they tell the students, we can't tell you what we're testing. It's not the questions. Don't worry about your scores. Just answer the questions and leave. And thank you very much. We'll give you your $10 or $20 or whatever it is. And actually, the test was this. There were 2 tests randomly assigned. And one of the tests was written with language that we tend to connote and associate with youthfulness. And the other test was written with language that we tend to associate with old age. And the actual test was filming the students as they stood up from their desks and walked along the corridor and down the stairs. And the students who read the test and took the test with the older associated language tended to walk more slowly after they got up from the desk, and they tended to hold the rail as they went down the stairs more. They actually felt older, not because they'd been told that they were older, but because they were thinking about things that they associate with being older.
Wow.
So this is, and also the feeling of being in control is crucial to us as a species. There was a study in a very large end-of-life care home with thousands of people staying there. And they gave a random selection of people in there, and I'm going to get the numbers slightly wrong, I'm sure. I'm going to misquote this, but the gist of it was they gave them 3 things that they had control over that the other residents did not. And those 3 things were tiny. Everyone in the building had a plant in their room, but the control group, the people in control, were allowed to water their own plant. Everyone had visiting hours, but the people in control were free to choose their visiting hours. And everybody would watch a film every week, but the people in control were given the option to vote on one of 3 films to watch. That was all they changed. And it correlated to a 30% extension in lifespan.
Wow. 30%.
30%.
Whoa. Okay.
Because they felt more in control. Control is crucial to us as a species. In fact, it's more important to us than pleasure and pain. That's why people put up with abusive relationships, because they know it. And the unknown of not being in that relationship is a loss of control. And that is terrifying for us as a species. And so they stay in the abusive relationship. They put up with the unhappy situation. They stay in jobs that they don't like. They take photographs they don't want to take. They play music they don't want to play because they know it. And it takes courage and trust in yourself to try new things. You have to trust your own judgment. You have to trust that you'll do the right thing, that you'll be okay, that you won't come to harm. Trust yourself to take care of yourself. And a lot of people don't have the ability to do that for lots of reasons. No judgment, it's just their experiences.
It's just what it is.
So in terms of what happens with your decline, no, I don't think, for myself, thank you for the question. I don't think that creativity itself runs out. I think it is an infinite supply. But I think that my means to manifest my creativity may change. I plan to die at 104. I've got that. I reckon that's a good age. And heart attack will work for me. But obviously, I'm joking.
Yeah, but, don't put that in the universe, Maxim.
But I figure that at 85, I'll ask people to come to me instead of me coming to them.
Yeah.
And at 95, I've been promising myself. When I was about 4 or 5 years old, I had a flower that I grew, and I really loved growing that flower. And I don't have time for gardening now. But when I'm 95, I've been promising myself I will take up gardening again. And people can come to me, and we can do the work that way. But I think if you're realistic about your circumstances, you can always find a way to create. And it keeps you young.
It does. Yeah, that's a fantastic answer to that, because I was hoping you were going to say that, because it's just it's too late. How old are you? just stop trying right now. This is fantastic.
I think there is one thing I would mention.
Yeah, go for it.
That people say that as you grow up, you become more stable, and you start to ossify. I think so. As young children, a lot of the ways that we navigate the world are based on not getting punished and being rewarded with, as a toddler, parents give and withhold love to reward and punish children. And that love and affection, and most importantly, attention, is really important for us as young children. It's the commodity for babies, because in the wild, we would be, we'd be dead if we were left by our parents or by our community. So it's very important to us as a species. And never underestimate, when you hear about a teenage child who feels traumatized by social exclusion, seriously, they were traumatized, because it is life and death emotionally for us, literally life and death. And so that trauma is pretty intense. Bullying is just awful for that reason. And I'm not getting into judging the bullies. It's a causal thing. So we have this thing where we learn behaviors that lead us not into getting hurt. We don't get smacked or shouted at or told off. The love isn't withheld from our parents, or our guardians. So we end up thinking, well, I'll keep doing that because that seems to be working. I'm not getting hurt now. And so as we get older, we try out more and more things that we get wrong in terms of our behavior, our characteristics. I like cheese, I don't like cheese, I run, I jog, whatever the thing is that we do. Well, I did it 5 times in a row and nobody punished me, nobody excluded me, nobody was upset with me. I guess that's acceptable. I feel okay, I'm going to keep doing it. And this is how a lot of chemical addictions occur, although it's a simpler mechanism, I think. So the problem is, as we get older, we get lazy because our brains use a lot of energy. And if we can repeat a behavior that we did before, our brains don't have to use up as much energy. It's like copying what somebody else did. It's incredibly efficient in terms of the energy use of the brain. And our brains evolved at a time where high energy foods were rare. I know this sounds like a stupid, as I'm saying this, I realize this just sounds silly, but just think about it.
Yeah.
It uses a lot of energy to create new memories and to do thinking, to think about things. Thinking is work. So if we can copy what everyone else is doing, if nobody's eating the yellow berries and everybody's eating the red berries, I'm just not even going to think about it. I'm going to eat the red berries. And lo and behold, it turns out usually that the yellow berries are poisonous and everyone knew it and you didn't. So copying other people's behavior is a very efficient way to live. It's just not a very present way to live. You're not really engaging. You're just copying people. But very efficient and very effective. And part of the way our society works as a large-scale society, it's fine. But in terms of our personal behaviors, we do a thing and we don't get hurt, so we do it again and we do it again. And then we have this weird delusional thing happens in our brains where we think that way of doing it is doing the thing. So for example, how long, I'm British, right? How long should you brew a cup of tea for? Let's say you brew a cup of tea for 2 minutes, and then in your mind, you forget that that's just a way to brew tea, and you start thinking that is brewing tea. And then anyone who doesn't brew tea for 2 minutes, there's some problem. And if you don't brew tea for 2 minutes, there's a problem. And you don't even think about it anymore. When you make tea, you just brew it for 2 minutes without even being conscious of it. So now are you really brewing that tea, or are you living in the memory of brewing it before? And the same applies to everything that we do. If you're a painter, are you going to paint the same picture because it looks good and people buy it and it's great? Are you really painting that picture, or are you reliving a memory? And I think as we get older, we have more and more and more and more of these behaviors. How do you put on your trousers? When you put on gloves, do you do the right hand first or the left hand first? When you brush your teeth, do you start on one side of your mouth or the other side of your mouth? We have these processes that we become less and less and less conscious of, because we're actually just repeating like a machine, a behavior that has worked in the past, and we keep doing it and we keep doing it. And I think that in many ways, that type of habitual unthinking behavior is a kind of dying that occurs as we get older. But it doesn't occur because we're physically dying. It occurs because we're disconnecting, we're disengaging, we're living increasingly an internal life, and we're not engaging with what's outside of us. I know I said earlier, everything that you do and experience is internal, but there is these stimuli, and you're not engaging with them. And that's why, it used to be believed that to be childlike was an aspirational quality. It was something that people strove for. And then, thanks to postmodernism, which I'm not a big fan of, being childlike got mixed up with being childish, which is a different thing. But to be childlike means to see clearly, without filters, without blinkers. You actually look at the thing, which is, the Emperor's New Clothes story. You actually look at the thing and see it. And children don't yet have judgments because they don't have the habits yet. Young children, as children get older, they start to learn about how important it is to judge people because they're judged and everyone's judging everybody. It's incredibly damaging. But I think that if you can stay lively, the word quick used to mean alive, changeable, be willing to try new things, but also to actually have the experience. This is mindfulness, I suppose, is what I'm describing, to be really mindful. Like if you overeat, there's a good chance you're not actually paying attention when you're eating. And if you really pay attention to what you're eating, really experience it, really enjoy it, you'll find you have less appetite. There was a study where some people came up with a way of people quitting smoking cigarettes. And the answer was you can smoke as many cigarettes as you like whenever you want, no restriction. But when you smoke a cigarette, you have to really have the experience. You've got to feel the cigarette in your hand. You've got to smell it. When you light it, there's the fire and everything. And then when you inhale it, you have to feel the smoke coming into your lungs, taste it, in your teeth. And that's it. That's all you have to do. Really experience it. Something like 90% of the people just naturally quit because smoking is disgusting.
So interesting. Yeah, it is. It's so interesting. And there's so many questions that pop up. We're going to do a follow-up interview after your conference.
I'm happy to.
I would love to talk to you. One of the things that I wanted a tangent that we will cover in the next one was just that repetition that you spoke about and how that directly relates to people, creatives getting into a creative rut. Right, because or irrational affinity towards a certain process or brand, because this is the way it's always been done. Yeah, fear of change. I've won awards with this photo over here, and I shot it with that camera, so I have to use that camera for everything and the same process and the same flow, thereby closing the doors to anything new.
And distrust for yourself. What you're saying is, I don't trust myself to make good decisions.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to do the same thing again that happened to work last time. And I wasn't really paying attention to what I did, so I don't know how it was that I made the decision that worked. If you were really paying attention, you would have potentially, not necessarily, but you would have potentially recognized the thing that made it special, so that you could take that essence and make it part of your work in the future. There's I don't want to get into it now because I know we need to wind up, and we can do this in another session.
Sure.
But there's this beautiful thing that was explained to me. My mother lives in Spain, and she was explaining to me that, you've heard people in Spain say "ole" when someone does amazing flamenco, or, they have this duende, this presence that rock stars have, and they come in the room, or they do something with such flair and so amazing, everyone in the room says "ole, ole, ole." And or ole, and you think, well, what does that mean? It actually comes from Allah. There was a strong Islamic presence in Spain for a long time, and what people are saying is, of course, Allah is the name of God in Islam, as I understand it. Not a Muslim, not claim to be an expert on any religion, but that's my understanding, is that's the name.
Yeah.
And so what they're saying when they say ole, is kind of the way language changes and sounds change over time. They're saying, I see God in you. There is something in what you just did that is divine. And it doesn't really matter what name you use, but the principle is so beautiful that I recognize divinity in you. That's fantastic.
That's
and
really
so
cool. If
you can find something in your work, and even if you don't believe that there is a transcendent being, let's call it that, if that's you're a mechanistic universe advocate, and even if you don't call it, let's say, an intelligent being, when the pieces fall into place just so, you could argue that everything in the universe is just the product of the 4 laws of thermodynamics. Although I have a theory there's a 5th law that a physicist friend of mine says is probably right, but they haven't tested it. But it's which is atomic entropy. But even if you believe that the universe is just random forces at work, chaos is only truly chaos if order emerges from it. If order doesn't emerge from chaos, then it wasn't truly random, because order has to be one of the random outcomes. And there's a weird thing in the universe that order seems to self-nurture. And so actually the universe, physicists are saying now, the universe is trending towards information and away from chaos. And nobody knows why, because the forces towards, everything breaking down and becoming random again should be equal to the forces driving towards information. Right, so you've got this pushing entropy and information. But it's not happening. The universe is actually becoming more ordered, which is fascinating. And so whatever your beliefs, if you find something that's just like a kick, something that makes you do a double take, something that makes you think, whoa, wait a second. Whatever that is, yeah, that is your creative work, not that particular photo that you took, not the particular drawing, not the one dance that you performed. It's that. If you've ever seen, I think the choreographer was Nijinsky, I think. If you've ever seen the ballet Rite of Spring, if you haven't seen it, watch a video of it. This was decades ago that this ballet was choreographed. And if somebody produced this dance today, the media would be saying, what on earth did I just see? Nothing like this has ever existed. This is just incredible. But what makes it incredible is that Nijinsky just let go and allowed something to come out of them that was unfettered by judgment and opinion. It's just this wild, crazy dance piece, unlike any ballet you've potentially seen before. So, yeah, I think it's fear and also a lack of willingness to take responsibility for what you've done.
Yeah.
And just to own it, to say, I did that. I made those mistakes and I had those successes.
Yep. Yeah, that's full circle. That's where we started the conversation. Just sort of giving is it better to give yourself permission to fail or to commit fully and press all the way through? I love that.
And give yourself permission to succeed. You have a right to be successful at your endeavors. Yeah. And the journey, the work is the failure for sure. That's the work. Yeah. But when you've done the work, if you're planting potatoes and you did the digging, you get to eat the potatoes when they grow, right? You made potatoes. Well, you didn't make them, you grew them. But you have to be willing to embrace all of the consequences of your actions.
Yeah.
And that includes the consequences that are undesirable and the consequences that are desirable.
Yeah. And I think part of that undesirable consequence would be the consequence of inaction and the illusion of, well, I'm not going to attempt that thing because I might fail. So I'm just going to stay put, which means you've already failed. Yeah.
Yeah, but you will fail. For sure, you'll fail. There's a tiny, tiny chance you'll succeed the first time around. Could happen. You might win the lottery, But the chances of you doing anything but failing when you begin are very, very small. And you're probably not meant to succeed straight away. So if you're afraid of that failure, then what you're afraid of is the thing itself.
Yeah.
That if you want to get from here to the top of a mountain, being on top of the mountain is something that happens because you traveled there.
Yeah.
So the being on the mountain isn't a thing that can exist without the getting there part. Those two things don't exist separately, right?
Yeah.
They are the same. They are one.
Yeah.
And so, just as the journey to the mountaintop, in a sense, is the mountaintop, because ultimately the final step of that walk, of that journey, is you being on the mountaintop, and the journey is not complete until you get there. So the journey is the mountaintop, but also the mountaintop is the journey. They're inseparable.
Yeah.
And I think it's helpful if people see any endeavor that way, because otherwise you feel like doing the work is undesirable, as if somehow you could have the outcome without the work, as if somehow they're separate. They're not.
Which is what you see, and you could be fooled into thinking that that's the case by seeing just the tip of the iceberg from successful people, right?
Yeah.
Well, all he did was that. Yeah, he just started singing, and now he's, you don't see the decades of work that went into getting to that point. Much like SpaceX, right? You look at Elon Musk and SpaceX launching these rockets. Like the last super heavy rocket came down and exploded in a ball of flames, and they said this was a success because we got so much data.
Just the way we thought it would.
Yeah.
But even if you think about, I don't know if did you see the game Angry Birds? It was one of the early, really, really successable mobile phone games.
Yeah, it's on my phone right now.
Right, and on mine. And Roxio, who, and I have one more little story to tell. It's hilarious about that. But Roxio, they have, there's this infographic about their successes and failures. And you think, wow, Roxio, they just came out with this amazing game. But I'm going to get the number wrong, so forgive me if I'm misquoting. But it was something like 37 or is it over 100 completely failed games before they came up with Angry Birds.
Wow.
And they just keep saying, okay, what did we do? What can we do differently? What can we do differently? Why did that not work out? Why did that not work out? Airbnb, same thing, tons of failed attempts. Uber, tons of failed attempts. And then they worked out this thing that worked. The failing is the journey.
Yeah.
And maybe we need a different word, because the word fail, I think we should just call it the work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like it.
The work is the putting the wrong paint in the wrong place, or you take a picture and it's not exposed properly. And that is the work of getting to the point where you have produced something truly great, whatever that means.
There are no shortcuts. There are no matrix things that you can plug into the back of your head to go from zero to accomplished. It reminds me of Jim Carrey. You remember the actor Jim Carrey when he was at in his peak? And I remember watching this interview that he did, and the interviewer said something like, "So Jim, what does it feel like to be an overnight success? This is amazing. You must be living in it."
In the making.
Yeah, that's exactly what he said. He's like, the world's best 10-year overnight success is what he said. Yeah. So, that puts a nice hook on it. So if people, just to reassure people, because we have this delusion where we confuse our subjective experience with objective reality. So we tend to, we imagine why somebody did something. And then because we've imagined it in a way that could be true, we're convinced that we imagined what did happen, why they really did what they did. But actually, you haven't got any idea at all. It's this false attribution of negative intent, usually. Someone cuts you up when you're driving and you think, they knew exactly where I was. No, they didn't. You were in their blind spot, and they had no idea you were there. And they're probably thinking, oh my goodness, I nearly hit that person. Yeah. You don't know why people do things, and you don't know why things happen. Well, that's frightening for us, because it's like a loss of control. So we imagine a plausible explanation, but without going into it now, you might be familiar with the frightened monkey theory, that we're evolved from. Actually, I'll just tell a story because it's hilarious. So there's two monkeys walking through the savannah, and there's a rustle in the leaves, and one of the monkeys jumps and says, "Oh my God, it's a tiger." And the other monkey just laughs and says, "Don't be silly, it's the wind." And there are two possible outcomes in this scenario. Outcome number one, it's just the wind, and the monkeys arrive with their friends, and the second monkey laughs at the first monkey and tells everyone how silly the first monkey was, and then they all laugh about it, and the first monkey's embarrassed. That's the one outcome. The other outcome is it was a tiger, and the second monkey is lunch. And so the theory goes that we are evolved from the frightened monkey, because it's the one that stayed in the gene pool by being the most careful. And so we have this whole bunch of mechanisms built into us to protect us and keep us safe. The reptilian brain in the middle of your brain, at the top of the brain stem, at the top of the spine, thinks faster than your conscious mind does. So if something flies at your face, you will blink before you have become consciously aware that the thing is there, because your reptilian brain, which keeps you breathing, keeps your heart beating, responded first. So there's this whole multiple brains, thinking about stuff, but most of it's there to keep you safe. And as a species, we don't differentiate well between emotional suffering and physical suffering. So if somebody shouts at you and they're nasty to you emotionally, our body responds as if we're being physically attacked. So all of those mechanisms that kept us safe physically are now being applied emotionally in our complex relationships. So we're the frightened monkey, and we have to be willing to take risks sometimes, but also to acknowledge that we are afraid, to keep us safe. And push through that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so good, so good. We have so much to talk about. There's so many different tangents on creativity that we can talk about, and just motivations and overlaying social media versus creative drive and direction, and who are you doing it for? All that stuff we can talk about. Yeah. So for the folks that are watching and listening to this conversation, this amazing conversation that we're having, thank you for this.
Thank you.
Is this kind of a taste of what they're going to get at the creativity conference, this kind of deep think?
I hope so. Thank you. Absolutely. But not all of it. I have a tendency to, just go deep and that's it, and that's my way. And I apologize if it's sometimes
I love
it's
it.
too much. You need air as well. But we've got some we have a fantastic speaker. Kerry is going to be speaking about stand-up comedy, and we're going to have we've got one person. Elan Shady is going to be speaking about the development of zombies as a concept. Wow. And Mariam is going to be speaking about horror for children, how to create horror stories that are appropriate for children. I can't wait to see that one. Wow. There's a lot of lightness in it as well, and a lot of comedy. My hope is that, it's my belief that the fulfillment of human potential is in the service of others. And in order for you to be a good vessel for that, in order for you to be able to help others, you need to take care of yourself and grow and become strong. And I think what I'm hoping is that if in one way in the course of the conference, 90 sessions, 3 keynotes, if each person who attends comes away with one thing that they hadn't thought of before, that they've grown in some way, they're empowered in some way, they're informed, they're more alive in some way, I'll be happy. That would be fantastic. We don't need to transform the world overnight. Just some way that they decide to try something new or have some new transformation in their life, some little change in their perspective. I would be thrilled. And I'm reminded of I'm so bad with names. There's a lady who was in a prisoner of war camp in the Second World War, and she wrote, I believe the phrase is that prejudice rarely outlives experience. I think it's one of the most beautiful phrases that I've heard. I was raised by intellectual hippies, and I'm very grateful for having brought up, to the best of my knowledge, without any isms. I think they're such a burden, they're such a waste of energy. But many people are, and we also have a kind of prejudice against certain types of experience, certain ways of being, certain ways of living your life. And I think that if you can give yourself new experiences, again, that experience outlives the prejudice against it. You realize, oh, this is a thing I can do. Yeah. I thought that was impossible for me. Absolutely no way I'd be capable of doing that. But as, oh goodness, so many people have said, no matter what you see people have done, they're just human too. They're just working at it and going through the process. Steve Jobs, wasn't it, who said everything that anybody ever achieved was achieved by somebody no more intelligent and no more capable than you. They made mistakes all the way down the line. If people come away from the conference feeling inspired and confident to try something they hadn't tried before, fantastic.
Love it. Great. And I'll tell you, I'm there right now. So thank you for this conversation. I will be at the conference. I'll be checking in there. And thank you for pulling that together. I know it's been a mountain of work putting that thing together, and you're still in it, right? You're still climbing that mountain.
We're a couple of days out. I keep remembering lately, I don't know if you're familiar with Kid President. Have you seen Kid President?
Yeah, yes, yeah.
Just love that. I don't know how old he is now. But there was a video
he's probably running for president now, I think.
I hope so. World president, I hope.
There you go.
My niece is down for that role, so they'll have to have votes.
There we go.
He had this thing where he was just saying, "Oh man, life is hard. It's so hard. Which you're trying to do stuff and it breaks, or the thing doesn't turn up, the person doesn't call you, and it's so hard, but it's worth it."
Yeah.
And everybody is on that journey right now. Yeah. It's hard for everyone. Truth is, it's only hard because we want things. But thank goodness we do. But here we are wanting things. Yeah. We want to be taller, better, stronger. We want to have whatever the thing is. We want relationships, whatever. But it is hard. And that's life. So dive in and get dirty. And the last quote I'll leave you with is that you're not supposed to arrive at the grave. I'm stealing a quote here. You're not supposed to arrive at the grave serenely. You're supposed to come tumbling and skidding across the ground, covered in cuts and bruises, saying, "Wow, what an amazing ride!" And you arrive late, and you're just, "Wow, that was incredible. I want to go again." That's how we should get to the end of our days, I think.
Run it to zero. There you go. I love it. It's not who has the most things at the end. It's like who has the fewest
who
things.
used the most.
Who timed it to zero, right?
Yes, exactly.
Fantastic. All right, Maxim, thank you for doing this. It's been an eye-opening and inspirational conversation. We could talk for hours, which we may do when we do our next episode.
In Iceland, maybe. Maybe in Iceland.
In Iceland, sipping tea over volcanic heat.
Oh yeah,
let's do it. Let's do it. I'm all over it. Okay, well, cool. So one more time, throw that URL out for us for the conference.
Creativityconference.is, India Sierra. That's the Icelandic domain extension. Creativityconference.is is the main website where you can get information about what we're doing. But please come quickly, because the conference begins Friday morning, the 22nd, 10 a.m. New York time.
Yeah, you got it. And we're doing a quick turn on this episode. If you're listening to this, it's probably just a few hours after we recorded it, because this is a quick turn episode to get this thing out this week, because the conference is happening this week. And I want to make sure everyone in the TWIP world knows about this thing. It's going to be amazing. I can't wait to dive into that. Maxim Jago, you are fantastic. You are inspirational. Thank you for coming on. And we'll see you at your conference during your keynote, day one. And then we'll do a follow-up at some point after the conference, where you and I will talk like this about how amazing the conference went and how you want to do another one right away.
Well, thank you. That would be really fascinating, actually. And I appreciate you sharing this with people. It makes a really big difference. And thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And you have a good rest of your week, man. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, you too.
This is TWIP.